She sat in the corner of the great alien station, a small figure hidden in the shadows. Her skin was pale, stretched thin over her bones, and her eyes were hollow yet still searching. She had not eaten for many days. Her body was weak, her voice almost gone. She was an outcast, unwanted, forgotten, treated like dirt by all who passed her. The station was alive with sound, with thousands of voices, strange languages mixing together. Merchants shouted about their goods. Guards stomped in their metal boots. Children laughed as they ran between the tall creatures, but no one looked. At her, no one cared if she lived or died. To them, she was nothing more than a shadow, a piece of trash that clung to the floor. Every day she tried to ask for food, just a bite of bread, a sip of water. Every day she stretched her hand out, trembling, hoping someone would take pity. And every day they laughed or ignored her, or sometimes worse, one alien kicked her hand away. Another poured dirty water on her face just for fun. Still, she endured. Because she had no choice, she remembered her home long ago. A place of green fields and silver rivers. Her people were once proud, once strong, once respected, but now they were broken. Scattered, hunted, her family was gone, her friends were gone, and she was left to starve on cold metal floors. The smell of food made her heart ache. Alien nobles ate roasted meat, sweet fruits, thick soups that steamed in bowls. The scents drifted into the air. Cruel reminders of what she could not have. Her stomach twisted in pain, but she had learned to stay quiet. Begging too much only brought punishment. Children pointed at her sometimes, their alien parents pulling them away. "Don't look," they would whisper. "She is nothing. She is less than dirt." The words cut her deeper than hunger. She wanted to scream, to remind them that she was alive, that she was real. But her voice was too weak, her throat too dry, so she sat in silence, invisible and broken. Yet inside her, a small flame still burned. She did not know why she still held hope. Maybe it was memory, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was something greater. But she refused to let that last piece of herself die, even if the galaxy mocked her, even if they wished her gone. She would keep breathing, one moment at a time. Sometimes at night, she dreamed. She dreamed of voices that were kind, of hands that did not strike, of food shared with laughter. She dreamed of her family. Her mother's soft smile, her father's strong arms, her brother's silly jokes. The dreams hurt when she woke, but they also gave her strength to survive another day. One day, as she sat curled in her corner, a group of aliens walked by. They carried golden plates filled with food, their robes rich with bright colors. One of them noticed her and smirked. "Still alive," he said, tossing a small piece of bread toward the floor. She reached for it desperately, but before her fingers touched it, he crushed it under his boot. The group laughed loudly, their voices sharp and cruel. Her hand trembled in the air, then fell back to her lap, empty again. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give them the joy of seeing her cry. She leaned against the cold wall, her body weak, but her spirit still clinging. Her stomach growled, her head spun, and darkness pressed at the edges of her sight. She knew she was close to death. But she also knew something deep inside her heart. Her story was not over. Not yet. The galaxy thought she was nothing. But she was more than they could see. For now, she was only the lonely outcast. But fate was moving, unseen, silent, waiting. Somewhere in the endless stars, something or someone was coming, and when it arrived, her life and the lives of many would change forever. The next day began the same way, with cold metal floors and empty hunger. She sat in her corner, knees pulled to her chest, eyes heavy with weakness. The station lights flickered as merchants opened their stalls, voices rising like a storm. The smell of roasted meat, fried fish, and baked bread filled the air. Her stomach twisted, sharp as a knife, reminding her of what she did not have. She lifted her hand slowly, trembling, reaching toward the crowd. "Please." Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Please. Just a little food." Most ignored her as if she were invisible. But some noticed, and when they noticed, cruelty always followed. A tall alien with 4 arms stopped in front of her. He looked down, smirked, and tossed a coin near her feet. Her heart jumped for a moment, but when she reached, he stomped on her hand. The sound of bones cracking echoed, and the alien laughed. "Worthless creature," he said. And the crowd nearby chuckled. Pain surged through her fingers, but she pulled her hand back and stayed silent. More gathered around, drawn by the sight of weakness. To them, she was not a person, not a soul. Only a toy for their amusement. One threw rotten fruit at her. Another poured dirty water on her head. She sat still, shaking, her clothes wet and sticky. The stench rising, the crowd laughed louder, pointing, mocking, finding joy in her misery. Children joined too, taught by their parents to treat her as less than dirt. A little alien boy picked up a sharp stone and threw it at her arm. She flinched but did not cry out. His father clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Good boy, never show mercy to trash." The boy laughed, and the sound stabbed into her heart deeper than the stone. She wanted to run, to hide. But her legs were too weak, so she stayed where she was, trapped under their eyes. Her mind screamed for escape, but her body betrayed her. Every insult, every laugh, every cruel hand pressed down like chains. The crowd grew bigger, a ring of faces looking down at her as if she were an animal. "Dance for us," one shouted, tossing a small piece of bread to the floor. Her eyes locked on it. Her stomach screamed for it. But when she reached, another boot crushed it again. The laughter roared like fire. Her hands shook. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She wanted to fight, to scream, to tear their laughter away. But she stayed silent, holding on to the last shred of dignity she had. Inside her, anger began to grow. Small but fierce. She asked herself, why must they enjoy her suffering? Why must they treat her like this? Her people had fallen, yes, but that did not make her worthless. She was still alive, still breathing, still real. But to the crowd, she was nothing. And nothing was easy to hurt. One alien woman leaned close, her voice sharp as poison. "You should die quietly, outcast. No one will ever help you. No one will ever care." The words sank deep into her heart. For a moment, she almost believed. Then, her eyes dropped, her shoulders slumped, and her hope dimmed. Then, something strange happened. From the edge of the crowd, a pair of eyes watched, different from the others. They did not sparkle with cruelty. They did not shine with mockery. They carried something else, something she had almost forgotten existed. Pity, curiosity, maybe even kindness. But the crowd did not notice. They were too busy enjoying their game. They jeered, they shouted, they mocked, their voices like thunder. The sound filled the station. Echoing off the metal walls, she sat in the center, a fragile figure surrounded by cruelty. Her heart beat faster. Her breath came shallow, she thought. Maybe this was the end. Maybe today she would not rise again. Still, she did not cry. Her tears stayed inside, locked away. If she could not win, she would at least not give them victory over her soul. Her silence was the only shield she had left. And though her body was weak, her silence made her strong. The laughter went on, endless and cruel. But fate was already moving. The eyes that watched from the shadows would not look away. They would step forward soon, and the crowd would learn that cruelty has a price. The lonely outcast was still nothing to them, but to one stranger, she was about to become everything. The crowd slowly began to drift away. their laughter still echoing like a bitter song. She was left in the corner again, wet, hungry, shaking, her eyes half closed. Her body begged her to rest, but her mind whispered that rest meant death. She held onto the wall with trembling fingers, forcing herself to stay awake. And then, among the noise of merchants and machines, another sound came. It was not cruel laughter. It was not the stomp of heavy alien boots. It was softer, calmer, like a voice carried on a warm wind. She opened her tired eyes and saw him, the human. He walked through the busy station with steady steps. Unlike the others, he did not wear bright robes or shining armor. His clothes were simple, worn from travel, his boots scratched with dust. But there was something about him, something that set him apart. He moved differently. Where the aliens rushed and pushed, he walked with calm. Where they sneered and mocked, his eyes searched quietly. He was not tall like the giants, not strange, like the four-armed traders. He was just a man, but somehow he seemed stronger than them all. The crowd had not noticed him yet. They were still whispering about their game with the outcast, but he noticed. His eyes caught the small, starving figure in the shadows, her thin arms, her bruised skin, her hollow cheeks, and he stopped. For a moment he simply stood there, watching. The station seemed to fade around him. The shouts and the noise grew dim. All he could see was her, the girl that no one else cared for. He felt a pull in his chest, a weight in his heart. It was not pity alone. It was something deeper. It was recognition. As if her suffering touched a part of him that had also known pain, he stepped forward, slow and careful. But the whispers began, sharp and mocking. "Look." "The human sees the trash," one alien said. "Foolish creature, does he not know what she is?" Another laughed. The words spread like fire. And soon the crowd turned their eyes to him. The human ignored them. He walked until he stood only a few steps away from the girl. She stared at him through tired eyes, too weak to move, too broken to believe. She thought he would mock her too, or strike her. That was what everyone did. That was what always happened. But instead, he knelt. Slowly, calmly, as if she were not dirt, but someone who mattered. The crowd gasped, their laughter cutting into silence. Never had anyone lowered themselves for her. Never had anyone dared. The human reached into his bag and pulled out food. Not scraps, not rotten leftovers, but real food. A piece of bread, simple and warm, wrapped in cloth. He held it out to her, his hand steady, his eyes gentle. Her breath caught, her heart raced. She looked at the bread, then at him. Then at the bread again. She could not believe it. Her mind screamed that it was a trick. She had been fooled before, lured with kindness only to be mocked. But his eyes told a different story. There was no cruelty in them, only a quiet strength. The crowd shouted again, their anger rising. "Leave her." One alien barked, "She is nothing. You will regret this, human." Another growled. Still he did not move. Still he kept the bread in his hand. His voice was calm but firm as he spoke. "She is not nothing." The words struck the crowd like thunder. They hissed and spat, their faces twisted with rage. No one had dared say such a thing in years, but the human did not care. He did not look at them. He looked only at her, waiting, patient, unshaken. Her hand shook as she lifted it slowly. Her fingers hovered near the bread, fear holding her back. Would he pull it away? Would the crowd strike her if she took it? But hunger was stronger than fear, and hope stronger than despair. At last, she touched it. The human let go. The bread was hers. Her lips trembled as she brought it to her mouth. The first bite was small, almost careful, then another and another, until tears filled her eyes. Real food, real kindness. After so long, the taste was more than bread. It was life. The human watched her eat, his face calm, but his jaw tight. He had seen cruelty before, but never like this. He knew in that moment that he could not walk away. The crowd could whisper, they could threaten, they could hate. But he would not leave her to die. The aliens spat curses, their voices sharp as knives. She will bring ruin. They cried, do not save her. She carries only death. The human's eyes narrowed, his voice steady as stone. Then let her ruin me, he said. I will not stand by while she starves. The girl froze, her eyes wide. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever stood between her and the cruelty. Her chest ached. Not from hunger this time, but from something new, hope. The crowd hissed louder, their anger boiling. But the human stood tall, his shadow falling across her small figure. For the first time in a long time, she was not alone, and though she did not know it yet, this moment would change everything. The human stood tall in the middle of the market. The crowd circled closer, their voices sharp with hate. They hissed and cursed, warning him again and again, she is filth. They said, she will poison you, she will destroy you. But he did not move. His eyes stayed on the starving girl. She clutched the bread tightly in her hands. Her body trembled as she chewed, her lips wet with crumbs. Every bite was a battle, not against hunger, but against disbelief. Was this real, or another cruel trick? For so long, kindness had been a lie. But this human felt different. The crowd grew louder, their anger a storm. Some demanded he leave her, others threatened violence. One alien spat at the ground near his boots. You will regret this, human, the alien growled. But the human only answered with silence, his back straight, his eyes calm. When the girl finished the bread, she lowered her eyes. Her voice was weak, but it carried the weight of years of pain. Why, she whispered, why help me? The human's answer was simple, spoken like a truth carved in stone. Because no one else will. The words struck her like fire. Her chest tightened, her throat ached. Tears burned behind her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him, but hope was dangerous. It always brought more pain. Still, his voice sounded different. His eyes looked honest. He did not see her as dirt. He saw her as alive. The human reached into his bag again. This time he pulled out a small container of water. He opened it and held it toward her. The crowd gasped, their whispers turning into screams. Stop him, they cried. She must not drink. But no one stepped forward. They only shouted, afraid and furious. The girl stared at the water, her throat dry as sand. She wanted it more than anything, but her fear held her still. What if it is a trick? Her mind whispered. What if he is like them? Her hand shook as she reached, her body torn between fear and hunger. The human waited, patient, steady, silent. At last, she took it, her lips pressing to the edge. Cool water filled her mouth, slid down her throat. She closed her eyes. The taste like heaven, like memory, like life itself. The crowd erupted with rage. They shouted curses, their voices sharp and broken. You fool, human. They cried, do you not know what she is? She carries death, she carries ruin. But the human did not flinch. His voice was calm but strong. If she carries ruin, then I will share it. The girl's eyes widened, her heart pounded. No one had ever spoken for her. No one had ever chosen her side. She looked at him as if he were something impossible. Her lips trembled as she whispered. Why risk yourself? He answered without hesitation. Because you deserve to live. The words shattered something inside her. All her years of silence, all her years of being treated like dirt. They cracked apart, and for the first time, she felt seen, not as trash, not as a curse, but as someone who mattered. It was too much. And tears finally fell from her eyes. Not from weakness, but from something new. Hope. The human stood and turned toward the crowd. His voice rose so all could hear. You treat her like dirt, but she is alive. She breathes, she feels, she suffers. She is not nothing. The words rolled across the market like thunder. Some flinched, some sneered, but none could silence him. The girl stared at him, her mind spinning. Could this really be real? Could this human truly mean what he said? Her body was weak, but inside her something stirred. A spark, small, but burning. The spark of survival, the spark of power, the spark of something more. The human lowered his hand toward her again. Come, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I will not leave you here. Come with me. The invitation froze her. No one had ever invited her anywhere. No one had ever wanted her near. She shook her head, fear twisting inside her. They will kill you, she whispered, if you help me. They will kill you. But the human's eyes did not waver. Then let them try, he said. The crowd roared in fury. Some lifted weapons. Some shouted threats, but none stepped forward. For there was something in the human stance, something that held them back. Something that made them afraid. The girl's heart raced. Her mind screamed with fear and doubt. But when she looked at him, she saw strength. She saw truth. And, for the first time in years, she wanted to believe. Her hand lifted slowly. Trembling, she placed it in his, small, thin, fragile. The crowd gasped, their voices breaking into chaos. But the human did not let go. He held her hand firmly, pulling her to her feet. You are not alone anymore, he said. And in that moment, her life changed. The human led her away from the angry crowd. His steps were steady, his hand firm. But her body trembled as she followed. The noise of curses and threats faded behind them. Though the hatred still burned in the air, they turned into a quiet corridor of the station lit only by dim lights that flickered like dying stars. The girl stumbled, her legs weak from hunger and pain. The human slowed his pace, adjusting so she would not fall. He did not speak right away, but his silence was not cruel. It was careful, patient, giving her space to breathe. At last, he stopped near an empty corner where no eyes watched them. He let go of her hand and crouched down to meet her gaze. His voice was calm but firm. Tell me your name. Her lips trembled, as if the word had been buried for years. Finally, she whispered, Liara. The human nodded slowly, repeating it as if to carve it into memory. Liara, he said, I am David. The simple act of sharing names felt strange to her, almost impossible. For so long no one had asked, no one had cared. To them she had been nothing but dirt. But to this human she was someone. Her chest ached, her heart raced, but still doubt lingered. She looked at him with hollow eyes and asked, Why? Why risk yourself for me? David's face was calm, though his jaw tightened with anger. I have seen cruelty before, he said, but never like what they did to you, and I will not let it continue, not while I can stand. Liara lowered her eyes, tears filling them again. She wanted to believe, but belief was dangerous. The crowd had shouted something again and again. Words filled with venom. They say I carry ruin, she whispered. They say I am death. David leaned closer, his eyes steady. Why do they say this? Her hands shook as she held her thin arms close. For a moment she said nothing, her silence heavy with fear. But then the truth began to pour out. Slow, broken, painful. My people were not always weak, she whispered. We were once strong, once feared. Long ago, my kind had knowledge, power. Something the galaxy wanted and hated at the same time. David listened carefully, his expression unchanging. Lyra's voice grew softer, her eyes distant, remembering what had been. We could touch energy, shape it, bend it, not machines. Not weapons, but ourselves. It was a gift, or maybe a curse, but it made us different. The word different shook in her throat like glass. Others grew jealous, afraid. They said we were dangerous, so they turned on us, betrayed. US hunted us. They broke our cities, burned our homes, scattered us across the stars. Now, most are dead. The rest enslaved, starved, silenced. She lifted her hand, thin and shaking. A faint light glowing under her skin. It flickered weakly, like a dying flame. This is why they hate me. This is why they laugh when I starve. Because if I live, if I grow strong again, they fear what I could become. David's eyes narrowed. But not with fear. He did not step back. He did not flinch. He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. Then let them fear, he said. It does not change who you are. Liara stared at him, her heart twisting. All her life, her gift had been her curse. All her life, it had brought only cruelty, chains, and hunger. Yet this human saw it differently, not as poison, not as ruin, but as part of her. Something worth protecting, something worth saving. Do you not fear me? She whispered, her voice almost breaking. David shook his head slowly. Fear you? No, I fear the cruelty that tried to erase you, but not you. You are alive, Liara, and that is enough. Her breath caught, her tears fell freely now. No one had ever spoken to her this way. No one had ever looked at her as if she mattered. Her gift flickered again under her skin, brighter this time. For the first time in years, it did not feel like a curse. It felt like hope. But even as that hope stirred, danger grew. Back in the market, the crowd whispered, shouted, plotted. They would not allow this human to protect her. They would not allow the last spark of her people to rise again. They would come for her, soon. With teeth and claws and blades, Liara sensed it too. Her body stiffening, her eyes wide. They will kill us both, she whispered. They will never allow this. David's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. Then we will not let them, he said. We will face them together, together. The word echoed in her chest like thunder. No one had ever stood beside her. No one had ever said such a thing. The loneliness that had wrapped around her heart for years began to crack. For the first time, she was not only Liara the outcast. She was Liara, survivor of a fallen people. And beside her stood a human who refused to let her die. The truth of her kind had been revealed. The danger was greater than ever. But so was the spark of hope, and as the lights flickered above them, Liara felt something she had not felt in a long time. The story of her people was not finished, not yet. The market had not forgotten. The crowd that once mocked now whispered in fear and anger. They had seen the human give food. They had seen him give water. Worse, they had seen the girl accept it. They had seen the spark of her kind flicker again. That was something they could not allow. Shadows moved through the station. Voices carried in the dark. Merchants closed their stalls early. Parents pulled children away. The air itself grew heavy, as if the station held its breath. The news spread. Fast, faster than fire. The outcast had been touched by kindness. The last of her kind had been given hope. And hope was more dangerous than any weapon. David and Liara walked through the quiet corridor. Her steps were unsteady, but she held herself taller than before. The bread and water had given her strength, but it was more than food. It was the human's words that carried her forward. You are not nothing, he had said, and the words refused to leave her mind. But danger moved behind them, silent and sharp. The crowd was no longer only a crowd. Now they were hunters, carrying blades. Carrying hate, they followed, waiting for the moment to strike. Liara felt it first, her heart racing, her skin prickling. She tugged at David's arm, her voice low. They are coming. David did not ask how she knew. He simply nodded. His hand slid to his side where a small weapon rested, but his voice stayed calm. "Then we face them here." They stopped in a wide hallway, the lights above buzzing faintly. The shadows shifted, and one by one the aliens appeared, their faces twisted with rage, their voices sharp with hate. "You dare protect her, human," one hissed, his blade glowing faintly. "She is poison. She is death. You will fall with her." David stepped forward, his body between them and Liara. His voice was steady, unshaken. "If she is poison, then I will carry it." The aliens snarled, their eyes burning with fury. "You will die for her," they spat. David's answer was simple. "Then, so be it." The first alien lunged, his blade slicing through the air. David moved quickly, blocking with his weapon. The clash rang out. Metal against metal, sparks lighting the dark. Liara gasped, her body trembling, fear surging like fire. But then something deeper stirred inside her. The aliens circled, waiting, watching. David fought fiercely, but he was only one against many. They pushed him back, each strike harder than the last. Lyra's heart pounded, her mind screamed. If she did nothing, he would fall, and if he fell, she would be lost again. Her hands began to glow. Faint at first, then brighter, the energy of her kind. The gift that had been called a curse, it flowed through her veins like fire and light. She tried to hold it back, fear of what they had told her, fear of what she might become, but David's voice cut through her fear, calm even as he fought. "You are not nothing, Liara. Remember, the words broke the chains inside her. Her eyes burned with light. Her skin shimmered with power. The nearest alien froze. His blade raised high, and then Liara raised her hand. A wave of energy burst outward. Sharp and bright, the alien was thrown back, its body slamming into the wall with a crash. The hallway filled with gasps, some of fear, some of awe. The crowd that had hunted her now saw the truth. The outcast was no longer silent, no longer weak. The last of her kind still carried the fire of her people, and she had unleashed it. David stood tall beside her, his weapon ready, but now the aliens hesitated. Their steps unsure, they had mocked her as dirt. But now they trembled at her light. Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly, her power flickering in her hands. She looked at David, fear in her eyes. "What if they were right? What if I bring only ruin?" David shook his head firmly, his voice strong. "You bring choice. You bring hope. That is not ruin," the aliens roared, their anger pushing them forward again. But Lyra did not shrink. Back this time, her fear was still there, but alongside it burned strength. She raised her hand once more, and the air cracked with energy. 2 more attackers were thrown back, their weapons clattering to the floor. The rest froze, uncertain, their eyes darting between David and Lyra. They had expected weakness. They had expected death. Instead, they faced a girl reborn, a human unbroken. The hallway trembled with silence, filled only by the crackle of power. Lyra's body shook, her strength nearly gone. But she stood tall, taller than she had ever stood before. David placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, steadying her. His voice was low, meant only for her. "They fear you because they cannot control you. But I do not fear you, Liara. I stand with you." Her tears burned her eyes, but she did not look away. She faced the hunters who had once called her worthless. Her voice rose, soft but strong. "I am not nothing." The words echoed through the hall like thunder. The aliens stepped back, their faces pale. The power around her flickered and dimmed. But the memory of it burned in their minds. They had tried to break her, but she had risen. They had laughed while she starved, but now they feared her strength. And in that moment, the turning point was clear. The lonely outcast was gone. In her place stood Lyra, the last of her people, and beside her, David, the human who refused to let her die. Together, they had faced the cruelty of the crowd. Together. They had survived, and together, they would change everything. The hallway was silent. The hunters who once laughed now stood frozen, their weapons heavy in their hands. The glow around Lyra's skin slowly faded, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. She breathed hard, her body weak, but her eyes burned. With something new, not only fear, not only hunger, but defiance, David stood beside her. Steady as stone, his weapon was lowered, but his stance carried unshaken strength. The crowd that had mocked them earlier whispered in confusion. In fear, they had seen the human fight without backing away. They had seen the outcast rise with light in her hands, and suddenly the game was no longer funny. One of the aliens hissed, trying to find courage. "She is dangerous," he spat. "She must be destroyed," but his words did not ring as strong as before. For the first time, doubt spread through the crowd. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. The girl was not dirt. She was not nothing. She was something far greater. Lyra's knees trembled, but David reached and held her arm. His voice was calm, meant for her ears only. "They fear you now, but fear is not power. Choice is power." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "They will never stop hunting me," she whispered. David shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. "Then let them hunt. They will learn that a human stands with you." The words spread through the corridor like fire. A murmur rose, carried from mouth to mouth. A human standing with her. It was a strange thought for the aliens. Strange and unsettling, for humans were not known as the strongest, not known as the most powerful, yet this one man stood against a crowd. Against a station, against a galaxy's cruelty. That was the human factor, not weapons, not numbers, not empire, but stubbornness, courage, and the refusal to bend. It was something no one could measure, something no one could break. Lyra looked at him, her heart pounding. All her life she had been told she was cursed, that her people's power was ruin, but this human saw it differently. He saw hope where others saw death. He saw strength where others saw weakness. And because of that, she began to see it too. The aliens began to back away. Some dropped their weapons. Others whispered in anger, but did not strike. They had faced her light once. They did not want to face it again, and they feared the human's defiance even more. Assurance for kindness was more dangerous than any blade. Because kindness could not be controlled, David placed his hand on Lyra's shoulder. Steadying her as she swayed, "You are not alone now," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Her lips trembled, her tears hot on her cheeks. For years, she had been dirt under their boots. For years, she had been told to die quietly. Now, for the first time, she was invited to live. The crowd slowly scattered, their voices fading into the distance. But the echo of what had happened would not fade so easily. They would tell others. They would spread the story. The outcast had risen. The human had stood, and the galaxy would not forget. Lyra leaned against the wall, exhausted, her energy nearly gone. But inside her, something burned, brighter than ever before. Hope. It was fragile, small, but it was real, and it was enough to keep her alive. David looked at her, his face calm but determined. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The galaxy thinks you are nothing, but together we will prove them wrong." Lyra's breath caught, her voice weak but steady. "You would fight the galaxy for me." David met her gaze without hesitation. "I would fight the galaxy with you." The words sank deep into her heart for the first time. She felt not like an outcast, but like a person who mattered for the first time. She saw a future that was not filled with hunger and cruelty. A future where she was not alone. The station lights flickered again. shadows moving across the floor beyond the walls. Ships drifted in the endless dark. The galaxy was vast, filled with enemies. Filled with dangers, but also filled with chances. And now, with one human by her side, Liara dared to believe she could face it. The outcast who had been treated like dirt, who had been laughed at while she starved, was no longer a shadow in the corner. She was Liara of the forgotten people. And beside her was David, the human who saw her not as ruin, but as hope. Together, they would light a spark, and that spark would spread. Through stations, through planets, through empires, until the galaxy itself learned the truth that kindness could defy cruelty, that hope could outlive despair, and that sometimes one human was enough to change everything.